longevity doesn't start when you're 35 because you don't want to get older. Longevity really starts in the womb and then really from birth, what we're doing with our kids and how we're feeding them. And this is why we've seen the decline in longevity and long lives is because we're eating crap and we're living in cruddy places and we're not taking care of ourselves the way that we should. So really, I'm like, longevity starts at birth, y'all.
Dr. Piper, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be joining you today.
I'm excited to have you. So I want to jump straight in with asking you, what is holistic health?
Holistic health is really looking at the connection of all of your bodily functions together. So many of us go to biology and I don't know, eighth grade, freshman in high school, and you learn your gastrointestinal system and your immune system and your nervous system, but you don't learn that they're all connected. And so really the conventional approach that's certainly taught here in the United States really it revolves around these separate systems and not how they're connected. So when it comes to holistic health, we are looking at that entire connection for the body, not just what's going on inside, but also outside as well.
So when you examine it, it is that holistic health side. But then if you were to almost identify it in yourself, what would you actually be looking at? What tangibly are the things that indicate holistic health or perhaps less health?
Well, I think most people, when they're not in a healthy state, they don't feel good. You have aches, pains, maybe you're carrying a few extra pounds that you don't want to be carrying around. You don't sleep well. So many people see things like increases in anxiety and they're like, oh, I'm so anxious. And we go to our doctor and like, here, have a pill, not, hey, what's going on at the root and why are you feeling anxious? So really when it comes to that holistic health and we have these symptoms pop up, it's really a signal to us that something's going on deeper in the body. And how can we then investigate that to really figure out what's going on?
It is seemingly the world of a pill for this, a pill for that. Even weight loss is now a pill rather than a training plan or a diet plan. And it seems to be people are making loads of money out of it. Marketing is obviously involved in it, but also people just want those quick fixes.
Mhm.
People don't want to examine their sleep routine or track things or, look into their nervous system or all of the things that would probably be the starting indicators for you to look at and perhaps identify red flags. So how does that work in the world of there's more and more quick fixes, there also seems to be more awareness of this holistic, natural approach. Is that something you've noticed?
Absolutely. I mean, we live in this time period of instant gratification. We want to watch our Netflix movie immediately. We don't want to wait and we don't want to have the patience. We usually tell our clients, you've lived your way into this. We have to live our way out of it. It does take time. But what I think people are noticing is that they're starting to take the medications for these different symptoms. Maybe they don't feel as good as they thought, or the symptoms aren't getting better. Maybe the symptoms are getting worse. And so I think a lot of people really just get to where they're rock bottom. They've tried everything. And so they start looking at, oh, well, maybe it is something else that's going on. And they start looking for holistic health, natural health, different ways to improve their health because what they're doing currently isn't working.
And do you think that that's something that should almost be re-engineered in our minds is instead of something's wrong, and obviously if it's a medical emergency we should always go to the hospital, but
Correct.
in terms of if there's something niggling us or small issues, rather than thinking immediately I'm going to go and in the UK you'd go and see your GP or you'd go and see your doctor, should we almost be thinking of a more holistic approach of that instead of just going on antibiotics and going on the next set of pills? Like, what does that actually do to us when we rely too much on modern medicine?
Yeah, I think we really lose the capacity to be in tune with our bodies. We're not really understanding, oh, I ate this and I know how it makes me feel, or "Ugh, I didn't sleep good and I know how this makes me feel." So I really feel like so many people have lost touch with their body. They don't know what those signals are. So we like to compare it to the check engine light in your car. If you check engine light in your car comes on, right, you go to the mechanic and you figure out what's going on with my car. But when it's our body, we don't see a symptom as, oh, this is our check engine light. Something's going on. We are just going to be like, oh, let me go get a band aid, put it on there. We'll just proceed with our day. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a disconnection, but I also think it's complete re-education. So not only do we need to be re-educated ourselves as clients and patients, but the medical community and on the broad spectrum definitely needs to. I mean, if you're going to your doctor and they're not like, what are you eating? How are you sleeping? These kinds of things, then something is missing because they do play a huge role.
But I do feel like that's exactly the questions that aren't always asked. And it's interesting because they are, as you say, such strong indicators. So, where do you think this education is almost coming from? Is it from, I mean, I know quite a limited amount on the pharmaceutical companies and their marketing strategy, but what I do know is pretty terrifying that there's so many causes, whether they're manufactured or not. And then all of these solutions, which obviously is making this pharmaceutical company a lot of money, and the cycle is we are the consumer. And then you can go into so many different elements of conspiracy theories and everything, which we don't need to do. But as someone who is an expert in your industry, can you talk me through a little bit of navigating that and also your views on that and your research as an expert voice in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. I read studies. Usually Mondays, I'm gonna get some notifications. I read a lot of studies, and I was reading the study this morning, and you get to the bottom, and there's disclosures about, well, there's this study, but this person is receiving funding from such and such, whether it's a food conglomerate or a pharmaceutical company or something like that. Those disclosures are in there. So I think as one week as consumers need to learn to read between the lines a little better as well and not just take everything at face value. So, really looking at, well, this study says, but this person got this funding from this company. So being able to break that down is incredibly important. I think really when you're going in to talk about your health is having the ability to stand up for ourselves. Because I think a lot of people don't advocate for themselves either. And I think that's incredibly important because we're just like, oh, you've had this training. Yes, we're just going to take that pill. Looking at the medications, reading the labels, doing a little bit more research than just taking everything at face value, I think would make a big difference too. So, you know, in the United States, the theory is, and I know that a lot of the medical community gets, an hour of nutrition training. So, you can't really go to your GP and say, "Hey, I think these things are bothering me," because they don't really understand that in-depth concept of the nutrition and how it's impacting the body. And we can't fault them for that. It's just how they were trained. So I really, looking at it as a whole is we as consumers also need to ask more questions and read between the lines.
Yeah, absolutely. But then the second kind of side of that is, I mean, the example you gave, you were reading a research paper, you've read all of it, you've understood it, you've got to the bottom, and then you see there's an affiliation. A lot of people may read a shortened version or some cliff notes, or they may read like an extract they've seen on social media, or they may just listen to someone talking about something else about that. And there's no understanding of the affiliation that has, which I think demonstrates the point of how terrifying it can be because you don't know what point of view it's coming from. You don't know what agenda this person has, this company has, what affiliation they have. And that's when it really becomes quite a maze, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's tricky and it's not always straightforward and easy for people to find the info and the data that they need. And a lot of times people don't even have an idea where to look. They may Google, but they don't really have a solid understanding of, well, how do I research this?
Yeah. So tell us, what should we be looking for? A rundown on the basics of what you would identify as something to avoid or be aware of.
Yeah, I think really finding someone who has an understanding, who can help you better understand your diet, your nutrition, your lifestyle, how they are impacting your body, both as a patient and as a client. Really looking at how you can ask more questions. I mean, yes, you can Google, but really make sure that you're reading the data in its entirety. Just like you said, don't read, a short paragraph and then be like, okay, because you may be missing information. So I work with a lot of children who have neurological disorders, tic disorders, and Tourette's. And so many parents come to us on medication. Well, what parents don't know about the medication is one, we have solid studies that say medications prescribed for these things do not cure them. And rarely do they reduce symptoms more than 50%. And many of them, the major side effect is uncontrollable body movements. So the parents are not reading the data and getting into the details saying, oh, this medication might cause uncontrollable body movements on a kid who has uncontrollable body movements. So it's really about you as the consumer, and the way that you are taking control of your health is reading into that data more.
Can you give me, Piper, a little bit of background on why you are so interested in health, holistic health, and not only interested, but a qualified expert now in it as well? It would be great to hear your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So my son, he will be 20 this year, but when he was 6, so over 13 years ago, he was diagnosed with a transient neurological tic. It's like Tourette's. So one morning we woke up to uncontrollable body movements. We were terrified. I mean, my husband was taking video, we were making pediatrician appointments. We were really scared what was happening with my son. And typically the modern approach is to say, "Oh, it's a tic disorder, just ignore it, they'll grow out of it," instead of really figuring out what's at the root. So, we went to doctor after doctor, we tried all the medications. This is before I had done all the research that I knew all of these things. So, I started going down the research rabbit hole and really educating myself because I knew in my mama soul, I knew something was going on and something was getting missed. I'm like, "What is it? I'm gonna find it." So after some really atrocious doctor's appointments, I went back to school to relearn everything I thought I knew about health and wellness, earned my PhD. I have earned a ton of other certifications. I'm board certified in natural medicine, but really looking at that holistic, natural approach to health and what it really entails. And so now my son he's going to be 20. He just started a job in June as a firefighter. He doesn't experience symptoms anymore of uncontrollable body movements. And so really it was, I started this to help him, and when people saw his success, I started helping other people, and now we help clients all over the world.
And what were the main things that you really identified? Because you can see what you mentioned, the prescription reliance and, the doctors just giving out more and more medication. But then there's how do you get then to the point where he's, starting his job as a firefighter with no experience of the symptoms he had before? What kind of happens in the middle? Because obviously you've alluded to this, yeah, holistic approach, but breaking it down, what does that mean?
Yeah, so we found a holistic natural provider who locally in town, who we started changing diet. And we started to see some changes, but not all of the changes. So then we
So what does
started.
that mean? Sorry, are you changing your diet?
Yes, we started
Mhm.
changing diets. So we got him gluten-free, dairy-free. We found out he was very allergic to soy. So we started really following for us a paleo style diet just because there was so much that we had to remove from his diet. We started to see behavior changes. He started to focus better. He started to think better. We were seeing some changes, but we could still see the symptoms. I was like, there's a warning light going off here. And then this is kind of where I started to go back to school because I really needed more info. I really needed more data. We worked with a provider who is now my genomics mentor, but genetic testing was a huge piece of the puzzle for us to be able to see changes to make sure he was getting the right nutrition, diet, lifestyle. We got rid of toxins in the home. We really went down the rabbit hole, got rid of the plastics and things like that. It was really a whole diet and lifestyle change to get him back to where he was. And this is really very similar approach that we use with our clients now, and they are seeing the same results.
When you start to tap into it, not only do you have the ultra processed foods, then as you say, you have all of these microplastics, and then suddenly you look at all of the chemicals that are just sitting in your home, and then the clothes that you wear, and the more you look into it, it is really terrifying. So where did you start? What point do you direct clients into, and yourself or someone who's listening to this? Because it sounds quite overwhelming to throw everything you own out and start again, and also very financially steep
Yeah.
of a lifestyle change for
Yes.
something that they might even be skeptical about, because although it's a massive lifestyle change, it almost seems quite simple, if that makes sense as well.
Yeah. No. So it was progressive. And what I tell our clients is don't think that you have to throw everything out overnight. So, for example, we started getting rid of the plastic cups in our house. We had tons of these, like from restaurants, plastic cups. So, every time I would go to the store and they had something stainless steel on sale, I would buy it and I would take it home. And so we would get one at a time and we would get it on sale. So now we have a huge collection of, stainless steel cups and bowls and things like this. Same thing like when you're working with changing your diet and you want to make sure that you're eating organic. Well, you don't have to go to your spice cabinet and throw everything out. Next time you need garlic powder, grab yourself organic garlic powder. Or, next time you're buying apples, buy the organic apples. So really you can slowly do these things. I tell parents you need Pyrex to store your food. Get it on sale at, you know, Target or Amazon or wherever. Buy one box of it, start there and start getting rid of some of these other things. So it's progressive. We do try to convince people that diet changes upfront are really pretty significant. So we usually get everybody gluten-free, dairy-free right from the start, low sugar, just really starting to reduce inflammation. So it does not have to be like rip the band-aid off. You have to get rid of everything. It's how can you change things over time?
Yeah, exactly. It's that incremental changes. And
Mhm.
then I guess it can be quite overwhelming when you are fighting against these marketing giants who are then marketing, exploiting this. Oh, this is this is that. But I guess if you're buying organic apples, then that means that they're not made with the chemicals because you have all of these certifications that you can't just slap organic on anything. So I guess that is quite a good way to look for those certifications that you know that you trust, not something that you're not really sure of. Or look where the meat is from, where you're buying it. Is it from somewhere way, way far away? You're buying lamb from New Zealand, it's probably gonna be pretty old by the time it gets to you, and just little simple things like that. I think can avoid the overwhelm, and obviously looking at the ingredients list is really a great way to start. But again, very overwhelming because there's so many horrible chemicals that you don't even know what they are when you start to look at the ingredients list. So quite good tangible examples that you've given there that I think people can really apply to their lives from day one, really.
Yeah.
So, can you talk to me about the work that you do then as well? And you've done this research, obviously, because of your son predominantly got you into it, and obviously, you found a great passion for it. Can you talk to me about the work that you do now?
Yeah. So I am the owner of the Tick Disorder, CEO owner of the Tick Disorder Institute Regenerating Health. So we work with tick disorder and Tourette's clients, most of them really also dealing with OCD, sensory processing disorder, anxiety, so ADHD. We see a lot of comorbidities in this population. Most of the clients we work with at the Tick Disorder Institute are pediatric. We do have adult clients, but most of them are pediatric. And then I am also the co-founder of a company called Elite Gene Labs, where we train practitioners to utilize genomic testing, specialty genomic testing in their practice to improve their practice results for their patients and clients. Um, so I have the genomics is really a deep, deep passion for me, which is why we had started this genetics training company, because I definitely saw a need for people being able to use the genetics as a roadmap to get their clients and patients better results.
And to what extent do genetics actually impact the lifestyles that we lead?
Yeah, so we use genetics as a roadmap, and there is a saying out there that genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. But really, the way that we are using it and the way that we are teaching it is, yes, you have genetic variants that may impact, how much inflammation you have in your body or how well you process certain nutrients, how well you detoxify. We can look at all of these things. But then we can also look at them and say, hey, we know genetically you're not a great detoxifier. You don't make a lot of glutathione genetically. So, what can we do in your environment to change that? Can we get rid of these toxins that you're, the bleach, the pine sol that you're cleaning with at home? Can you look at the things that you are exposed to out in the environment? If you're working in an office building and your office is right next to the cleaning closet where all the chemicals are, can you move your office? Can we get your office to stop using all of these chemicals? So really, this is just one example how we use it as a roadmap. If you have the genetics for some aggressive inflammation, it's a great way for us to say, hey, let's have this conversation about how you can follow a low inflammatory lifestyle and what does that look like for you. And then the other thing that we do is I don't believe that any test is going to give you all the answers that you need. And genetics is, genomics is one of them. It's not going to give you all the answers you need. So we really need to look at not just your genes as a roadmap, but what are those outside influences? If you're, having digestive issues and you're not feeling well and you're not sleeping well, let's one look at your genetics for how well your gut may or may not be working. And then let's look at a stool pathogen test. Well, what's really going on in your gut and how do those two connect so that we can come up with a really good solution that's personalized for you?
Because it is a bit of a chicken and egg situation of which came first. Is it your lifestyle choices and your lifestyle in general that has made you have all of these, if we use the example of dietary issues and digestion issues, like is that because of your diet, or is it because of your genetic makeup that is actually you're not able to digest certain foods and you have all of these things that you suffer from? So maybe it's a little bit of both, really. Do you see?
I definitely think it is a little bit of both. And, for myself, I can really look at it from the perspective of I had lifelong anxiety, horrible anxiety. I can remember as a kid, didn't want people looking at me. I was always scared people were going to kidnap me. I just had this lifelong anxiety. I thought it was part of my personality. When I got to college, I had tried some medications, made it worse, did not help. But it wasn't until my son got sick and I started doing the research on him that I really discovered that, yes, part of it was my genetics, but part of it was my environment, things that I was eating, things that I was doing in and around my home that really were impacting me as well. So when I could take those two things and say, okay, partially genetics, but partially these things are really impacting, your inflammatory status. Once I adjusted those things, I don't have anxiety anymore. But I don't feel like if I had just done the genetic piece alone, that it would have given me as strong answers as being able to correlate and really connect those dots with other stuff that was going on with me.
Yeah, it's very much one piece of the puzzle that
Mhm.
gives you a clue and you need to go and investigate it. And if you don't mind, actually, could we go into that in a little bit more detail? Because I think a lot of people will relate to the feelings of anxiety and living with that. Maybe they've had it for a lot of time. Maybe they're aware that it probably is their lifestyle. But what did you examine? What did you find? What changes did you make in your life?
Yeah. So, one, I have a lot of genetics for predisposition for aggressive inflammation, meaning I can turn it on, I get exposed to something, I get super inflamed, but I have a hard time turning it off. So, we have to look at the role inflammation plays in your brain as well. And so you have a lot of inflammation in your brain. You have a lot of microglial cell activation. Those are the immune cells in your brain.
And
And
what
then,
causes that inflammation? Sorry. What does
oh,
that cause? Is that
all sorts of stuff.
food? Is it
Yes.
lifestyle? It's just everything.
Yeah. For me, it was a lot of inflammation caused by gluten. I was eating
Okay.
gluten and um, I am very gluten intolerant. We'd wager to say celiacs, but I refuse to eat gluten long enough to get the test done. So we're just going to go with I just avoid it like the
Probably answers your question, doesn't it?
yeah. And it did, getting rid of gluten offered a lot of answer a lot of health issues for me, like as a kid, like digestion, stomach aches, all of these kinds of things that so many times we're like, oh, my kid has a stomach ache. Oh, it's just anxiety. And I'm like, well, I can look back and say, no, was it something they were eating that was causing the stomach ache that was then causing the anxiety?
Mm.
So for me, definitely getting rid of gluten. I really do better on a grain-free diet. So we had already removed all the chemicals and toxins from the home. So not a good detoxifier. I knew that I needed extra glutathione. I started getting glutathione IVs. I don't process B12 worth a darn. So I can eat meat until I'm blue in the face, but I'm not absorbing it because of the genetics that I have for B12. So I have to take a sublingual B12 super high dose every single day or get an injection. That helped significantly because of my B12 genetics. So really it was a whole lot of, how can I bring down inflammation? How can I help myself detoxify better? How can I remove things from my environment like the gluten and the toxins? And then how can I get that extra nutrition that I need to really help with all of this?
Yeah, you've taken a lot of things away, and then you think, what do I actually put back? What are
Yeah.
these whole foods that are being replaced? And even if you flick on to say Instagram at the minute, there's so much information out there about really great ways to eat whole foods, to make yummy snacks, to meal prep and things like that. And there is a lot of misinformation out there as well. And there's a lot of people, as we said, in the more skeptical view before, that they're trying to exploit something for someone or some reason or anything like that. But a lot of the time, a lot of these content creators are actually giving a lot of ideas of how to do things like substitutes and even, being gluten free. Like 15 years ago, there wasn't really any option of substitutes compared to now when you can have an entire bakery that's gluten free, lots of different options. So it is interesting how the tides have kind of changed. But with that, the tide has changed because the demand has increased. Why has that, for if we isolate the gluten-free example, why are so many people gluten intolerant now? What is the cause of that?
There's a lot of theory behind it.
Yeah.
One is that, especially here in the United States, when we cut down the gluten for processing, we spray it with glyphosate, which is a desiccant to dry it out. So you're getting a nice, good dose of glyphosate that, of course, is going to damage your gut microbiome, give you some leaky gut. It's really awesome. But we've also modified it. So wheat used to be like a long, tall, grass, and we've modified it. It's very short, so the gluten in it is very concentrated. Um, and those are just two of the examples of how gluten is impacting people. And really, when we look at grains, most people don't digest them well in the first place. So I think we love gluten. It's delicious, but I think it really impacts a lot of people that they don't realize it. So for me, just being in practice for 8 years working with clients, I really see the impact of gluten very significantly on the brain. So people are like, well, it doesn't hurt my stomach. I don't get a stomach ache, but I have horrible anxiety, or I have horrible depression, or my kid's behavior is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and they are off the wall. And I'm like, when we start to remove, and it's not always gluten. I've got kids who can't do oats or corn or whatever. Um, but when we start to remove those things that are really causing that inflammation, we see a huge change in behavior and symptoms.
It's super interesting what you just explained there about how the actual processing has changed and the actual product that we're eating. The ingredients are modified, and everyone it won't be massively surprised to hear of the chemicals that will be sprayed on at each process. But the fact that even the actual wheat itself that is used is different, it's grown in a different way, it's a lot more concentrated. Is this linking to, I guess, the increase in the ultra processed foods, the cost of food in general going down compared to what it may have been 50 years ago? Certainly. Is that just a byproduct of that? Basically, that it's cheaper to make, if we say gluten, if we're going with this example, it's cheaper to make a load of bread for the supermarket in this way. It's not as good for you, but we're going to make more money in this way. And it's just another byproduct of it, which is terrifying.
It really is, and it really is. It's sad to see. And we've changed the way that we make bread. So part of making bread 50 years ago, they put iodine in the bread, and now they put bromine in the bread, which pushes out iodine, and we have iodine receptors on the cells of our body. And so changing not just the gluten and the wheat, but the other ingredients that are in there, we've started adding things like enriching it with folic acid. Lots of people cannot process folic acid. So when we're looking at that, we're looking at how we have these companies who want to more efficiently make a loaf of bread, for example, and make the maximum amount of money on it. But we also use a lot of garbage ingredients in there because it's cheap.
And even the process of it, it's not rising itself in a
Right.
natural way. It's artificially being sped up in that, which is another manufactured process, which just makes it's not rising in a way that is light and fluffy. It's rising in a way that is probably stodgy. It's probably looking like the bread that we would buy in the supermarket, but it's not going to be digested in a way that is going to be as friendly to our stomachs. Never mind all the ingredients that are in it. So it's
Well,
just, it makes sense from a business point of view, but it also makes sense in why so many people are struggling with it. But what has really blown my mind, what you've explained, is the link between, say, anxiety, or say, I don't know if depression would be a link of it as well, or these mental conditions that we have that we may actually not associate with diet as a whole. We may associate it if we have drinking a lot of alcohol, or maybe a bit too much caffeine, or too much sugar. But the fact that it's so intrinsically linked is quite surprising in the dramatic effects it can have of causing something like anxiety, which is a huge impact on your lifestyle.
Well, then it takes you all the way back to what we were talking about in the beginning about how people are not connected to their bodies and they don't know how to listen to their bodies. And so for me now, years later that I have learned this, I mean, this is something we should be teaching our kids. But years later, now that I've learned this, I can tell like, ooh, I should not have eaten whatever it was. I'm like, it really will amp up my issues. And my sister, she works for me and she, says the same thing. And so it really gets us back full circle is yes, we have a lot of these mental issues that I think are so impacted from food, and we just don't know it.
Hmm. So talk to me about genetic testing. What actually is it? How do you genetically test someone?
Yeah. So we send you a little swab in the mail. It's like a giant Q-tip, and you swab the cells off the insides of your cheeks, and we send them in. We use PCR testing to break it down and really look at the genetics. So we are looking at we're not looking at chromosome disorders like Down syndrome or Fragile X. We are looking at genetic SNPs. So they're called single nucleotide polymorphisms. So if you think of it like a book. So when you're reading a book and you read the word dog, this is a story about a dog. And then in our genetics, when we get a SNP or a single nucleotide polymorphism, it might change that first letter to F. And then it changes the context of the sentence. So instead of dog, it says fog. So your body is like, okay, well, I still kind of know what fog is. So I can still do this process. And then sometimes you get two-letter changes. And so you end up with, SOG or log or whatever the case may be. So it really is basically just we're looking at these little teeny code changes in your genetics that changes how well your genes express. So we're telling your body the signals what to do. And some people express better and some people express worse. We don't have the science to say, oh, you have. So MTHFR is this gene that everybody knows. There's a lot of misinformation about it out there, but it's a good example because most people have heard of MTHFR. But when we're looking at MTHFR, it is the last gene is in chain. People freak out. Oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. And so we have to look above and beyond just one little gene, and we have to look at the impact of what's going on as a whole. So, we're just looking at this one single gene change, but how does that connect to your body and what's going on with your body? So it's not just like, oh, I have this gene. We're going to compare and contrast. Well, you have this gene. Do you don't have you don't sleep well, do you have muscle weakness? Do you have all of these symptoms that can kind of go along with it? So we have to be able to compare and contrast that information because we don't have the science to say your gene's functioning or your gene's not functioning, but we can say we suspect it's not functioning well. Do you have these symptoms?
And how many genes are you testing for? What does the process run through?
So for me, I look at about 55 genes. We could look at the entire human genome now. We have the technology, but why? Because we don't have the science on every single gene. So I look at 55 very specific genes that have scientific data behind them. So I want to know, hey, we know this gene and it's impacted. We have this study. So I'm looking at the data behind those genes. So I look at 55 genes. I used to be a clinical educator for one of the genetics companies. And I find that any more than about 55 genes gets very overwhelming, and clients just can't wrap their mind around these are the changes we need to make. So, really, for me, if I can keep the genetic as tight as possible and compare it with everything else that's going on, they are going to be far more compliant.
Could you maybe give like a few little examples of some of those 55 genes that you look at? Because a lot of this is probably going to sound very scientific and we get it, we understand it, but really what are you looking for? What are these indicating? And maybe we could have an example of, okay, you find that someone maybe does have a genetic disposition for this, or maybe they don't. What does that mean if we take you can pick your favorite gene as an example.
Do I have a favorite gene? Um, so for example, I think this is a really good example is my sister, horrible digestion her whole life. Gas, bloating, nothing would digest. She was constipated all the time. She had depression. She just felt awful 24/7. She at one point went vegan for 12 years because she was like, it was the only way that she could go to the bathroom. But once we went down the rabbit hole and started testing all the genes, We found out that she has we look at three histamine genes. So we look at AOC1 and then we look at two HNMT genes. I kind of call them like the backup to AOC1. She has horrible histamine intolerance genes. She cannot break down histamines from food. So she knows that there's certain things she needs to avoid now, like tomatoes, dark chocolate, um, alcohol, really high in histamine. So she can do that, but she can also, there's little capsules that she can take with her meals to help with that digestion, enzymes, DAO, which helps break down the histamines in food. So yes, she was having all of these problems that were driven by histamines, which she could have gone on a low histamine diet and we could have never looked at genetics, but we wouldn't have known how severe it was. And we use that genetics to guide us to say, hey, this is how we change your diet and lifestyle to help improve your digestion and make you feel better. So, those are just three of the genes that we're looking for histamine issues. But then we also know, hey, you have these genes for histamine issues. You have the symptom for histamines. But what else could be driving it? Do you have candida? Do you have, biotoxins from mold or mycotoxins that might be making it worse? So it's really about looking at all of those things collectively.
And this may sound like a silly question, but obviously we're talking about genes here. Does this mean that your sister's daughters or sons are going to suffer from the same genetic disposition as she has, so therefore the same issues with digestion?
No, and it's really cool because we have his genes too. So it's fun when you do the family because I can sit down and start connecting everybody's genes. So because you're going to get genes from mom and genes from dad, dad may not have those. So we know her son does not have a severe histamine intolerance because he actually got some good genes from dad. So although my sister has it horribly, her son doesn't because dad was a good contributor.
I see. Yeah, it really does all link in together. It's funny, isn't it? How
Yeah.
you add them in together and see what happens. And then on a, maybe more somber note, then you've got all of these diseases, you have all of these illnesses. We've got, say, cancer or degenerative diseases. To what extent can this be genetic?
So I actually don't look at what I call, oh my gosh, I'm going to die genes, because those are things like the colon cancer genes, the breast cancer genes that people see and they freak out and they're like, I'm going to go get, a full mastectomy. But it's similar in the fact that just because you have the genes doesn't mean you are going to get it. So just because you have the breast cancer gene doesn't mean you're going to get it. But how can you make changes in your environment to keep yourself from getting it? So, yes, a lot of people are going and having the surgery done, but just because you have the gene doesn't mean that you're going to get it. So, I really look at it from that perspective. And, it's kind of like the gluten. When we look at the genes for gluten, I'm like, just because you have it doesn't mean you're going to get it, but it does increase your risk because we know that about 90% of people with celiacs make the HLA-DQ2 protein. So it's really trying to keep that piece in mind. It's just not a reason to panic. It's a reason to change your environment.
And that really links back to the whole idea of holistic health because although you're starting with getting this genetic testing, which maybe will feel more scientific than the natural medicine approach, we then have that understanding of, okay, you have this gene that maybe could, lead to something more severe like cancer, or it could actually just mean that you're not able to
Yeah.
digest something. And therefore, you can make these changes of, I'm actually not going to consume much alcohol because it's really bad for me, or if I do, I know why I feel in this certain way. And it's just that understanding and equipping you, I think, is a word I would use of it's not rules. I think that's something that really with health and wellness generally, it's about knowledge, it's about understanding that our brain and our gut is so connected that if we do something, it's probably going to cause us to have a spike of anxiety if we know that we're prone to that. And therefore, yeah, if we have the genes for that, we're going to even know it's more severe. And it's understanding why we feel in a certain way is actually quite a powerful way of equipping us in life.
Yeah. And I love it because we can then use that genetics as a roadmap. My kids are going to college and wanting to, be firefighters and these kinds of things. And I'm like, well, let me pull out your genes. Like, how can we optimize your genes to just make sure that you're getting all the nutrients and things that you need to really work in this high performance job. So even to this day, we are still pulling out genetics and looking at them and using them as a roadmap. It is not the be all end all. It's just a roadmap.
So talk to me about a roadmap. What would it look like for a example client?
Yeah. So, if we look at it from my pediatric clients, we know that boys, especially, but kids who are growing between the ages of about eight to, I mean, boys, when they're maturing at 26, they use about 4 times more nutrients, especially folate and that growth factor. So we can look at the genes for that. How well do you process that folate and make that bioavailable folate? And, if you don't, how much extra do you need to really help in with this status to really help you grow and be successful? So we know that, hey, these kids are going to need more nutrients. So we have a lot of people being like, "Oh, you have to take the kids' vitamins." And I'm like, "Well, not necessarily, because we know your kid has these genetic SNPs and we know that they need this much more folate." So then we can look at that years later. In fact, I have somebody who her daughter came to me, she was, 6 or 7, and now she's in her teen years and we know she's going to need more nutrients. And I just said to her this morning, "Hey, let's pull out our genes. Let's see, the current dosage and recommended recommendations you're currently doing with supplements, diet, all of these things, and let's tweak it based on what we're seeing on her genetics." So we can just really reevaluate and give you a new plan, and you don't have to retest.
Exactly. And it's just, this knowledge, this understanding and something to work from as well, which is really great. And you can revisit it time and time again because it's literally your genes. And then to kind of finish off I want to talk to you about natural medicine because I think when you say that, it sounds a bit confusing because it sounds a bit like you've got, this big old recipe book and you're making all of these, potions and stuff like that, which obviously is not going to be the case. But what does natural medicine mean and what does it actually look like in your life?
Yeah, so for me, I am a PhD, I am not an MD. And so my goal is to use all natural recommendations: diet, rest, stress reduction, exercise, lifestyle, the supplements. So we're using all natural things, whether it is in an herbal formula. I have someone else mix those potions up for me. But whether it's an herbal formula that we're using, to get your gut back on track, or we're using some immunoglobulin products to really boost the immune system in your gut. We are looking at everything from the natural perspective. So we're not putting in the pharmaceuticals. We're really focusing on the diet, lifestyle, environment.
Interesting. And what are the lessons that you've learned from this dive into natural medicine and naturopathy in general? What are the things that have really made your mind go like, wow, that's insane?
You can move the needle and get incredible results if you will take the time to focus on your diet, your lifestyle, and environment. Like, you do not have to rely on going to 57 doctors and taking 57 prescriptions. You can really get there if you have someone who knows how to guide you. Um, it and it makes such a difference in your life, and it really helps kids especially to learn how to listen to their bodies. I mean, my son, like I said, he's gonna be 20 this year, but he can tell you how much food impacts him and his behavior and the way that he thinks and the way that he functions. Whereas 10 years ago, he wouldn't have noticed, but now he can really feel that out and notice. So really just looking at how we can make changes to your life without having to put in the chemical concoctions.
I've used this example before in the podcast, but if you view your body a bit like a car, if you're going to put in, the crappy, cheap petrol that's really watered down and, it's full of stuff that you don't really know what it is, but it works and it's fine, it gets you from A to B, your car's probably not going to last as long as if you put in that lovely premium stuff that you actually know that it's made properly and it's actually a premium amount of things and it costs more. But if you think about longevity, then I think there's an interesting view on longevity because it's not necessarily that you want to live forever. It's being able to do the things that you like to do for longer and having that quality of life that means you will sleep through the night, that you can digest your food without feeling like you're so bloated and uncomfortable, that you can have the energy to do things as well. So it is the food, food is fuel really whatever you eat, but there's certain levels of it and that understanding. And then of course your genetic testing and your genetic predisposition is just that another layer of, I guess, yeah, equipping you with that knowledge of why your body does what it does. Because it's mad when you look into it. Our brain, like we've touched very, very lightly on the understanding of your brain and how it's all impacting. But there's so many layers to it the more you look.
There are so many layers to it. And, for us, it's how do we break down those layers for people and really make it understandable in bite-sized bits? Because the people that are coming to us already don't feel good. They're already tired and overwhelmed. And so, one, how do we really start to break that down for them? And, the perspective of longevity to me gets me. And that is the buzzword. It's such a hot topic.
Mhm.
But I'm like, longevity doesn't start when you're 35 because you don't want to get older. It's longevity really starts in the womb and then really from birth, what we're doing with our kids and how we're feeding them. And this is why we've seen the decline in longevity and long lives is because we're eating crap and we're living in cruddy places and we're not taking care of ourselves the way that we should. So really, I'm like, longevity starts at birth, y'all.
That's a good, yeah, it's a good perspective because really if you bring it back 70 years, people were growing things in their garden. There wasn't the supermarket, there wasn't the click and collect delivery or home delivery or Uber Eats or any of these things. And you would have time to be able to make food because you had to, because there wasn't a ready meal. And you wouldn't have all of these ingredients that make things last forever. And people would be spending time outside because you wouldn't have your screens because the internet didn't exist, and people would actually go to bed earlier because you didn't have a light bulb, so it got dark, by 7 p.m. And what else are you going to do? You might make it through till 8:30, but then it's going to get pretty boring if you only have a candle and a book because Netflix wasn't a thing. And the more you think about our lifestyle, and then even two parents out working, suddenly kids are dropped off at childcare, or kids just have a packed dinner rather than a home cooked dinner. And then because everybody's so busy, you don't actually have the time to put proper snacks in when you can just grab a chocolate bar. And there's so many different levels that you look at. And again, it's not making anyone feel bad for any of these decisions because it's how our society is set up at the minute, and it's difficult and things are very expensive, and a lot of people have to both work and send their kids to childcare because that's the only way they can afford things. But I think it, as you said, the really examples of, getting washing up liquid that actually isn't toxins, that you can get stuff which doesn't have the toxins that still washes your dishes, to get laundry detergent that doesn't have that awful, awful chemicals in it, and awful scented things like that are really going to agitate your skin and your children's skin as well. It is those examples, isn't it? But as you say, I love how you said, it's literally before you're born. It's the whole upbringing.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
it absolutely is, and I think that, that discussion of longevity is we need to change that perspective of we're focusing on people in their midlife. No, way down here, way down the line, we need to be focusing on it. It really starts at birth. It starts with mom's eating,
Yeah.
drinking, sleeping.
So Piper, to close off, someone's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I get it. I really agree. And you know what? I'm trying my best, but I don't really know where to start. What should they be focusing on? What's your advice to them, the people who are trying hard but not really sure how to approach this holistic health? What would you say to them?
Yeah, the first step I would say if you're really trying to do it on your own is get a whole foods diet. Change your diet. And when I say whole foods, we're talking about meats, fish, fruits, vegetables. Stay out of the processed, packaged, bar-coded bologna in your store. Eating the eggs and the meats and the fruits and veggies, that's going to be your best bet. Avoiding the processed sugary stuff. It is a great place to start. And there's so many resources. I mean, you can Google, you can get cookbooks. Pinterest is a wealth of recipes for things gluten-free, dairy-free, paleo, whatever the case may be. Paleo is a great diet because it's getting rid of all that processed stuff. Um, you can find so many recipes. So really looking at how you can change the diet and the lifestyle. But if you really want to dig deep, it's about finding someone who really starts to know how to connect those dots for you. Like, let's look at the stool pathogen testing. Let's look at the organic acids testing. Let's look at your genetics and how does it all play a role together.
And that links beautifully on to me asking you, Piper, where can people find you online and where can they work with you?
You can find me at regenerating.health. We have clients all over the world. Just hop on, click initial consult. Yes, mostly focused on children with neurological issues, but we do work with other people as well. And then if you are a practitioner or provider looking to really up level your practice using specialty genomics, we are at elitegenelabs.com, and you can fill out a little bit of information and get on our wait list there for our next course.
Amazing. I'll link those below so people can check them out. And thank you so much, Piper, for this conversation. We've really dug deep into all things genes and how our body is really made up and how the lifestyle factors can affect it. And I think it's such an important conversation. And thank you so much for your expertise and your time today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was a fabulous conversation.